Hey there everyone, Cameron coming to you again live for the favorite part of my week, these live leadership question and answer sessions where I get to interact with you and try to provide you some insight and just some help as you go through your week. If you are coming to this late, you can find out about these. If you go to my Facebook page, there's an event section. You can subscribe to the events and you'll get notifications, just little quick ones, nothing that's going to be too obtrusive to you, but little notifications of when these things are so that you can be prepared. So if you have some questions, you have some struggles, we all wonder sometimes in leadership what it is that we're supposed to do in a particular situation. So it's great to have this as a resource. Gaddy, welcome aboard. Good to have you here. So I just want these to be resources for you. We can all ask our questions. But what I also encourage a lot of is I love to get viewer participation. So if you're tuning into this and you've got some insight, you've got some things that you'd like to mention in regards to a particular question that I'm answering, please throw it in down in the comments section. That's absolutely fantastic that everybody gets to share their knowledge. I don't pretend to have all of the answers, but between all of us that are out there, I think that we can put together a pretty good idea of what particular person should do in a situation. Shame, Eric, great, welcome aboard. Good to have you here. So what I wanted to do first is I wanted to actually tackle a question that I had last week in one of these sessions that I didn't get a chance to get to. Abdul Hamid, I'm sure that you will, as long as you keep pressing forward, keep learning. That's the key to all of these. Sunil, Joey, good to have you on board again. The question is what do you do with an employee that tries to undermine you at every step in the process? So you come out with something that you want to do, some decision that you have, and they constantly are undermining you. Well, in the case of those employees that really aren't on board, what you want to do is you want to open up the communication channels right away. You know that they are going to be a barrier to whatever decision, whatever project that you have. Anna, Jamie, welcome aboard. Faizan, good to have you here as well. So you know they're going to be a barrier to your success. So bring them in. I don't want to say bring them in early, but address their concerns right away. So go forward with the decision, but then ask them what their thoughts are on it. And now what that does is that opens it up, and what will likely happen is they won't have any problems with it, but then you'll hear about them undermining it later on. All right? But since you've had that initial discussion, you can then bring them in and ask them, hey, I heard you still had some problems with this. I asked you about it. What's the deal? I wanted your feedback on it. You need to give it to me so that we can address these things right away. I want to know what you have to say on things. But make them a part of the not the decision-making process, but make them a part of the discussion about things. So as you start opening up that dialogue, they know that their undermining of your leadership is not going to go unnoticed, that they're not going to get a free pass, that they're going to have this difficult discussion with you. So that gives some accountability. Ruben, Marvin, sorry, cut out there a second there. Sherry, good to see you here as well. So they'll know that their undermining isn't going to go unnoticed. They know they're going to have that difficult conversation, but you're also starting to value their opinion. A lot of when people undermine things is when they don't feel appreciated. It's a way of lashing out. So go ahead, bring them into the discussion as much as possible, and that'll really help you out there. So Alev, Rosie, good to have you here as well. For those of you that are tuning in a little bit late, again, I'd love for you to go to my Facebook page. There's an event section. You can subscribe, and that way you know about these ahead of time. You don't have to wait for the notification. You can actually know that I'm doing this at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time today. So be sure to do that when you get a chance. I'd love to get the questions down there, and I also, again, encourage you guys to participate with answers to the questions as well. I think all of us have great experiences, and all of us have contributions that can be made to these discussions, and together all of us have a really good answer, I think. Charlene, good to see you here again, and Tarek and Amanda, thanks as well. The other thing that was brought up in the last session that I wanted to address before I get to today's questions is how to ask for a pay raise. And it's something that's going to come up. A lot of times organizations now structure this, so be aware that you might be having a discussion that is kind of going to go nowhere to a certain extent. What you want to do is you want to lay the groundwork well in advance for that pay raise. So you want to be trying to take on as much as possible as far as special projects are concerned. And again, I'd love to get everybody else's opinions on how to handle that discussion of getting a pay raise. That would be very helpful as well. Colette, Amuya, good to see you here as well. But you want to lay that groundwork well ahead of time. So take on those special projects, but start documenting what it is that you do and how you're bringing value to each of those tasks. It's not just the responsibilities. Responsibilities are cute from a resume perspective and everything. Oh, great, you're supposed to do these particular things. What we want to know is what value you're bringing to those particular areas. And you want to start looking at the accomplishments that you've made as well. It's very much like laying out your resume is when you're asking for a pay raise. So you want to say what it is that you're doing, what value you're bringing, what accomplishments you have, and why you're worth it. All right? So you need to have all of that stuff laid out in advance as much as possible. The other thing is you want to pick your time. So you want to schedule a meeting with your boss. You want to have it on their calendar. This is not a pop into their door and spring this on them. You know, you want to go ahead and have a discussion and say, hey, go ahead, let's have a meeting. I wanted to discuss my future and my development in the organization. And then you can start having that discussion. And what I tell people when they're asking for a pay raise is it's one of those things that bosses are really apt to just say no to right off the bat. You can throw in all kinds of things. I don't have the ability to give it. You know, we need approvals here. We need approvals there, HR, that sort of thing. You know, Jeff asked the question, never demand a raise. You certainly never demand a raise unless you're willing to walk out the door because of it. But what it does is it actually starts the discussion. And so, again, this is like so many other things, like getting your ideas across to your boss. It takes perseverance. It takes timing. So when you have that discussion, when you lay out your case, shall we say, with the right sort of facts, you're demonstrating and realizing your value. And while they might not recognize it, they may have that reflex reaction, it's something that's going to stick in the back of their mind a little bit later. And it can also be that discussion of development. So it may be that they say, you know what, in your role, you're already peaked out. You can't get a raise in that particular role. But what it does is it then brings up the question, well, what role do I need to get a raise? And that's something that can help with your development. It helps get you in their mind so that they know that when these opportunities come up, that you're looking for those opportunities. And that can be opening the door to further development and further raises down the road. So it's a long process. Like I said, you set the groundwork before the discussion, you have the discussion, and then usually there's some groundwork after the discussion that needs to take place. Now, Jeff brought up a good point in regards to never demanding a raise. And I agree, you shouldn't demand a raise assuming you want to stay with that organization. But there will be times, those times when I say that it is okay to move on from a particular job is when you're not developing, when you're not learning, and when you don't have those career prospects. And if career prospects for you mean money, then it's okay to go ahead and demand a raise if you're willing to put forward or push forward with that leaving if they don't give it to you. You absolutely should be recognizing your worth. And if you're not getting it at a particular organization, I recommend giving them the chance to step up to the plate and earn, your employment by giving you the raise and giving you the value that you need, but make sure you're matched with the market and make sure that you have those prospects afterwards in case they don't. So that's my big question. So Charlene kicks us off today with today's questions, and that is, I have a supervisor on my team whose leadership skills are lazy and is being patterned by the people she oversees. What can I do? Charlene, that's a fantastic question. And what I recommend is getting specific. As much as possible, you need to get specific. So when we're dealing with, for lack of a better term, lazy workers, whether it's supervisors or whether it's line level workers, you need to get specific with that feedback that you have. So how is this particular supervisor being lazy? How is that coming out? And what you need to do is you need to address it in the instance. Feedback gets its effectiveness from specifics and from timeliness. I'm going to say that again because it's important for everything that we do in leadership as far as feedback is concerned. You need to be specific and you need to give it in a timely fashion. If you do those two things, they can't back away from it, and it has the most impact because they can relate to whatever was going on that brought it about. So you want to give that specific feedback as much as possible to lazy employees, because they're going to find the gray area as much as possible. So that you need to fight that gray area with specifics. The other thing you want to do is you want to get absolutely clear on what the expectations are. I say it again and again and again. So many of these things are about being clear with your team as far as what the expectations you have of their job is, their role, and then holding them accountable to it. So yes, you already have some feedback for them, but make sure that this supervisor is clear on what you expect, what results you're looking for. You don't necessarily need to lay out every single moment of their day. They're a supervisor. They should be able to fill in the blanks. All right, you need to be able to give them results that you're looking for and have them chart the way towards those results. Now, you can be a part of helping them with that, but get clear on those expectations, and then that feedback has to be specific and it has to be timely. Don't just tell, you're not going to tell them they were lazy, but don't just give into that sort of behavior. Hold them accountable to those expectations. That's my big advice on those things. So Jamie asked a question. Alev, good to see you here. And Devin, thanks for joining as well. Jamie asked a question. I'm trying to be promoted within my company, but constantly the jobs go to other people, and I'm starting to feel that I have to go to another company, but I have been there for over 10 years. Any suggestions? Jamie, I'd open up the conversation with your boss and say, and I'm trusting, I've got a feeling that you've already had this discussion, but be clear on what it is that you're looking for. I'm looking for a promotion into this role, or this role. It might be multiple departments that you could look at, but you're looking for, say, a supervisory role. And I'd love to get it in accounting, in customer service, or in finance. What's it going to take to get through there? Can you introduce me to those bosses? Can I ask what it is that they're looking for in people? But make sure that you've had that discussion. It's important that your leaders recognize that you want to move up in the company and what you're looking for. And the reason is not that they shouldn't be doing this sort of due diligence when they're making their decisions, but you want to stick in their head when they start thinking about, okay, I need to promote somebody. You want your name to be on that list as much as possible. So you want to open them up to those ideas. It also opens you up when you start asking them if they need help with anything. This is great when it's your boss. It's easy. When it's another department's boss, it's a little bit more awkward. But ask them if there's anything that you can help with to get yourself some exposure in other areas and learn some of the skills that you need to move forward. And that's gonna help you out. Now, when you ask them what they need in an employee, what you will typically get from them is you will typically get the response, you just need to work really hard and be exceptional at your job. That's the default answer for people, because most leaders haven't thought about the traits and the abilities that they're looking for in their supervisors or in some of their other roles. They don't actually have an answer when you ask that question. So realize that. But what I would also do, if you have a number of people, Jamie, if you have a number of people that are moving ahead of you in the organization, what you need to do is look at what their traits are. Really do a deep dive into what this particular person is good at. So if Cameron was moved into a role that you were looking for, what are Cameron's strengths? What are his weaknesses? What is his background? That sort of thing. But do that with each of these people. And from that, you can put together a picture of what they're looking for and what experiences they're looking for. And then you can frame your experiences to match what it is that they're looking for. And that really helps as far as moving up. Now, if you, after doing all of this, after having the discussions, after making yourself available, if you find that you're still being passed over, then that's when you look elsewhere. Again, the times when I look to leave a position, or when I tell people to leave a position, it's when I'm not developing, I'm not learning anything, and my job prospects for promotions and my, moving up the career ladder are limited. Those are the two things where I look to move on from a particular job. So that's what I really recommend in that case. Hey, I got lots of great questions coming in. I really appreciate that. I'd love to get your thoughts on some of these questions as well. So if you see one on there, or if I'm answering one, throw out your 2 cents. Again, I love to get other people's feedback. I don't pretend to have all of the answers on this. And if you haven't signed up for my events page, I recommend doing that. That way you just get a little notification in your newsfeed when I have one of these sessions, so you can be aware of it ahead of time if you have any questions that are coming up in your job as things come along. Alyssa asked a question, a very good one, I think. How do I report behavior without risking my job? I need to move up, and should I address to managers who's friends with these workers and always does nothing, or go straight to a corporate in an anonymous complaint? Last employee who had notations and proof was fired. Alyssa, in this case, I would worry about that. You have to always assess that. We know that we're supposed to bring concerns, and this is important for everybody out there to realize. We know that we are supposed to bring our concerns. We know that we're doing what's best for the company, and there is nothing wrong with bringing up concerns. Perhaps we are off base in what our concern is. We don't have the right background knowledge, whatever else, and whatever's going on is actually correct. But what you have to do is take a temperature check of the company. It is risky. A lot of times when we bring up these concerns about bad bosses, for instance, they're bad bosses. So they're going to take the bad behavior and lash out at us on those sorts of things. So you need to be mindful of that. Alyssa, what I would do in the case of anonymous complaints, it sounds quite frankly that you'd look to take this in an anonymous fashion. But what I would look to do is I would look to see if you can get some backup from other team members in regards to this. It's easiest when you're giving feedback and going over your boss's head or bringing up complaints about particular team members. The easiest way that people get defensive on that is they say, well, that was just one instance, and that's just one person. They just have a personality issue with me. So what you want to do is you want to be very specific, but you also want to bring in, reinforcements. So if it's 2 or 3 of you that are mentioning a particular incident, well, now that is something that's very specific. It is something that is not a personality conflict between you and your boss. And so you want to try to do that, but I said specific, but you need multiple instances. So really bring up multiple specific instances, so it's not just a one-off thing, and bring in multiple people, and then it's not just a personality or individual issue. But that's how you do that. But I would really bring it in anonymously. I hate to say it, but it's a reality in this world. So Meryl joins us from Singapore. Welcome, Meryl. How to manage a high turnover, resulting in hiring, train, quit, hire, train, quit. It's quite tiring on your part. And Meryl, I'm sure you are absolutely the case. That it's tiring. It's brutal hiring. Anybody who's done hiring, it's brutal trying to fit that into your schedule, and then trying to oversee training while doing the rest of your work, and then if they're quitting, dealing with going through it all over again. Meryl, where you want to start is you want to start with the hiring process. You need to make sure that you're bringing people in that are going to stick with it. That's the first part that you're missing. Why are these people quitting? What traits did they have that caused them to quit? Go back and look over who you hired and where it was and why it was that they quit. Because you want to... I would look to be more selective in the hiring process, and that will help you out. I would also, in the interviewing process, I would also make clear that you're talking about the culture of the company, that you're talking about what the expectations are, that you're giving them a window into what their first week, their first month, their first 3 months is going to look like. That way you're setting the expectations. A lot of reasons that people quit jobs is not what they thought it would be. So you need to get clear on what it is that that they're in for when they accept this job. A lot of people would stick with a job if they had an understanding of what it was ahead of time, but because it's something different, they start out on a negative mindset. So be more selective in your hiring and be clear about what the culture is, what the expectations are, and what the job looks like in the interview. And then you can also gauge with the applicant how well they're reacting to what the reality of the situation is. That's what I'd look to do in those cases. Jody joins us and asks the question, how do you keep your emotions away from situations? I'm quite an emotional manager and really struggle with it. I always tell myself to toughen up, but it doesn't always work, and I end up taking it personally. And Jody, that's a common issue with all of us. We're human beings. Yeah, we're supposed to be leaders. We're supposed to be, setting the bar for everybody else, but we're human beings too. So to tell you to be more robotic about it is not something that is going to be likely to get through, shall we say. A lot of it comes with wisdom. A lot of it comes with experience. So situations that you find yourself in over and over again, difficult situations, you're able to deal with a little bit better. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel as you gain more and more experience with things. But the first thing you want... Sorry, my connection keeps cutting out here just a little bit. But the first thing you want to do is realize that you're going to make mistakes. Leaders are not perfect. We are held to this perfection standard, and we hold ourselves to it, and our teams hold ourselves to it, but we are not perfect. So you are going to make mistakes. All right, so you need to get clear with that, and you need to understand that, Jody. But what you also need to know is you can overcome those mistakes. Those mistakes are part of the process. So you're going to mess up. You're going to fail at certain points. But what matters is what you do with it afterwards. Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate that. But you need to, realize that the mistake isn't the end. It's how you deal with it. And it's the end result that comes after that journey through that failure or that mistake that really matters. And so that's what I want to try to drive home to you, is that you're not perfect. None of us are. The only way we get better at leadership is by making mistakes and recognizing it. And the key is just to get through it. That's really what the power is. For you is to get through of those mistakes. You're going to deal with these better over time. As you gain wisdom and you gain experience, you roll with the punches a little bit easier. But realize that initial mistake and those problems that you have are just challenges that you need to overcome. And that's it. Gloria, I'm glad you tuned in. Glad I was able to help. And Tracy, good to see you again. Kathy asked a question, what is a good strategy to help my middle managers set boundaries with their assistants so personal relationships don't get in the way of handling business and or reprimands when the line is crossed? And Kathy, that's fantastic. So I am a big fan of having those personal relationships, but there needs to be limits. All right. I in this connected world, I don't think that you can go ahead and separate the personal and the professional. That line gets blurred a whole lot. People end up becoming Facebook friends and connecting otherwise, and so it's not realistic, I think. But there are limits that you need to have. So you need to have that open discussion, Kathy, with your middle managers. You need to bring up the discussion and what your expectations, what your thoughts are on it, and just make sure that it's known. It shouldn't be this big, that pink elephant in the room that nobody pays attention to. It needs to be something that's discussed. So get clear on what your expectations are. I expect people to be friendly. We spend too much time at work not to be friends with one another. Yes, I don't see a problem with them, going out afterwards with friends. But what I always recommend for my managers is when you go out with subordinates, when you go out for drinks, when you go out to a party, when you go watch a football game, that sort of thing, look to be the last person that arrives and look to be the first person that leaves. That usually cuts out any particular problems that you have. I wish that you could stay on later, but it is such a difficult line to balance. I mean, you see it right there with reprimands. It's the perfect place where it comes in. Very few people have the maturity to be able to flip that switch between friend and between boss. And you want to give your friend the benefit of the doubt. You want to give your employee the benefit of the doubt, whether they're your friend or not. But you need to get clear on that. So, Kathy, I'd have the discussion. I'd give them your thoughts on particular issues, if you have some specifics that come up. And then I would reinforce that you need to be clear as far as the expectations are concerned. If you're looking to do, reprimands, if you're looking to do scheduling, that sort of thing, get clear on what you expect your middle managers to do with their teams. So just have that discussion, get it out there, and look to refresh that discussion probably on a quarterly basis with them, so that you have that, you bring it out into the open, and it's not something that is tucked away on the wayside. Tarek asked the question, how can I bypass my manager without making him defensive, especially with bad managers? Tarek, you can't. You're going to make your boss defensive. And that's why I really don't, the only times that I recommend jumping the corporate ladder and going above your boss's head are when you have a legal or ethical responsibility to do so. And that's usually, harassment, organizational, finance issues, that sort of thing. When you have a legal or ethical obligation to bring it up. If they're a bad manager, that's not necessarily a reason to do that. The reason is A, they'll be defensive, but also it also often reflects poorly on you when you bring it above their head to their boss, because so much of leadership is communication. And so if you've just admitted that you're not communicating well with your boss and you can't get through your concerns to them, that also reflects on you, rightly or wrongly. It does. So I don't recommend bypassing your manager. I recommend having more discussions with your manager. I recommend trying to help your manager wherever possible. We have a duty as responsibility as employees in our roles, and we're all employees. The CEO of a company is beholden to the board of directors and shareholders. So we all are employees of somebody, and we need to help bring out their strengths and help cover up for their weaknesses. Again, we all have strengths and weaknesses. Your boss has strengths and weaknesses. You have strengths and weaknesses. So as a team, we need to come together and try to help our boss overcome those weaknesses that they have and try to keep them in their strength zone, shall we say. Miang, thank you. I appreciate that. But that's our role as leaders. That's what we need to emulate. We do that for our employees as well. Our employees have strengths. Our employees have weaknesses. Our role is to bring out those strengths as much as possible, build up those weaknesses, cover up for them to a certain extent, to see that everybody is working efficiently. But I don't recommend going over your boss's head. That's usually something that doesn't play out well for you or for them in any number of different ways. So that's my call on that. Jenny asked the question, a great one. What's the action plan to prevent a possible attrition from a performing employee? It's one that's actually come up a couple of times now, and I think it's fantastic. So you have this great employee, you have performing employees. Thanks, Noel, I appreciate that. You have great employees, you have performing employees, but you're concerned they're going to leave the organization because maybe there's not development there, maybe there's a number of reasons it's not there. What you want to do when you have those high-performing employees that you don't want to lose, that you don't want to move on to another job, is you want to bring them in and you want to have that discussion on what their development is. Great employees want to be recognized for their greatness and their contributions to the organization, and they also want to be challenged and developed. So bring them in and find out where they want to go in the organization, where they see their career path is, and then find ways to challenge them and develop them in that way. Again, remember, the two reasons that I say to leave a company are when you don't have any growth prospects and when you're not learning anything. Both of those things usually have to be fulfilled. But the learning is the most important. So if you're developing them, if you're giving them exposure, if you're challenging them and they're learning, they're less likely to move on to different positions and different organizations. And that goes not just for your performing employees, by the way, that goes for all employees. When we see, organizations that have a high turnover rate, I usually see organizations that aren't engaging with their team nearly as much as they should. And that's why that attrition can take place, because the employee is not invested in the relationship with the organization. So if you want to keep somebody on your team, you need to start communicating with them more and more as it goes along. And that goes for just development, and that goes for giving them insight into the organization and everything else. That's the real key. Dunya asked the question, Devin, welcome aboard, how to raise employee morale. The first thing I always recommend in raising employee morale is to recognize the successes that are going on. Too many times in leadership, we are focused on finding problems and fixing problems. And what that does is that leaves us blind to all of the successes that are going on. So you want to start recognizing when you want to catch people doing something right, not catch people doing something wrong. So catch them doing something right. Give them an attaboy when they had a good sale, when they had a good phone call, when they shipped a bunch of orders that particular day. Recognize those successes that they had in their metrics in their day. Recognize when they learned something well. Or if you can't find anything else, just walk over and tell them that you appreciate all the effort that they give. Give them a heartfelt appreciation. But recognize those successes. That's the first thing. We want to be a part of winning teams. That's the fun part of organizational success, is winning and having that team environment. But we don't talk about those successes nearly enough in leadership today. And so be a part of that. The other thing to do is to start setting team goals and publicizing those goals. You likely have some goals that you're beholden to by your boss for the quarter, for the month, for the year. But go ahead and post those up on a board outside the office and track those on a daily basis. People like to, again, be a part of winning teams, but they need to know what that goal is. And if they can start working towards that together, if they can start recognizing that they're making progress, they feel better about their job. And those are the two things that I really kind of focus on. And so that's my 2 cents on that, Dunya, but that was a great question. I'm going to go ahead and sign off today. We've hit about 30 or so minutes, and I'm going to get to the rest of my day, and I know that you all have lots of work to do. If I didn't get to your question, I will be spinning through these later on today, so you'll see it in the comments section on this video. It'll be up on my page. But until then, have a great one, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.